Hey, Stewart's Chapel, this is Don Pierson and Don Counts, and we're at Chuck and Karen Barnes' home, and we appreciate them and their hospitality. This is Friday's devotion, and I'm going to take you over to Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5 and 8. He has started up earlier in chapter 5 talking about submission, and then he breaks down going from submitting to one another to each of the characteristics from the wife, husbands, children, and now bondservants and masters. Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill or kindness, doing service as to the Lord and not to them, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. It's interesting that, for us in a period of time where, there's still a lot of slaves in the world, but in our part of the world, we don't talk about that much. It's interesting to find. In fact, we don't talk about it and think it's so strange that when we read this scripture, we just go on and automatically think that it's applicable to our situation about our boss. And there are things that can be applied to that, but you got to understand that these were real slaves who were owned. They were property. And the word that God gives to them is amazing when you think about that. These are Christian slaves or servants. And he tells them that whatever they do, that they shouldn't do it just to be seen or for their master to treat them better. No, they should do it as though they were doing it to Christ. As they were doing it to Christ. And doing it from the heart. Not out of compulsion, not out of force, but from the heart. With kindness and goodness in the heart, and the main thing. And whatever you do, whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord. That was to them. When we were in language school in Costa Rica, we were there for a year. Language school is extremely intense no matter what country you're in and what language you're learning. It's very, very intense, especially when you have children. You're basically in language learning all day long, 24/7 every day. You're saturated. Your language is foreign there, and you're just surrounded in a different world. As a result, the mission boards would require that their missionaries that were in that period, that they would hire servants. That they would hire a servant, because there wasn't any time to fix the meal. There wasn't a time to do all the other stuff, because every bit of your day was spent in either going to classes or practicing or meeting with a tutor, and language study was the thing. But the other thing was that your servant would be in your home so much, and that you would have a servant that didn't speak your English, speak your language, and so you were forced to learn to interact with this servant. The missionaries before you generally picked your servant, and you called them big brother or big sister. They were the missionaries that had already been there a while and were on their last part of their missionary learning, and they would arrange your servant. Our servant that our big brother and sister had picked for us was Maria. Maria was a fairly new Christian, but oh my goodness, she grew dramatically. She had been a servant for missionaries for decades. She was extremely gifted at what she did. Maria did everything well, and that's no exaggeration. All of our laundry had to be done by hand, and so outside of our apartment there was this concrete wash tub and washboard, and that's where she would wash all of our laundry, every bit of it. and then she would hang it up on lines and it would air dry. Everything was folded. I mean, she folded underwear, socks, everything was just perfectly neat, clean. She cleaned the whole house. Everything was clean. She cooked not only our lunch, but she would prepare our supper and have it waiting for us. But I remember the first week. Now, if you've never had a servant, and we had never had, that's a little interesting to have someone in your home all the time and coming home that first week. Well, the first day we came home, there were these labels or cards on everything. She had put labels on the curtains, on the walls, on tables and chairs, and it was the Spanish words for everything. And she had labeled everything. That was way beyond her responsibility. And she would constantly, when she would hand us a fork, she would tell us what that was, or this, or what we were eating, she would tell us what was in it. She went way, way beyond. Needless to say, my children and my wife and I, we fell in love with Maria. Maria was a sweet, sweet woman who lived in poverty. She literally lived. I remember when we went to her home, she wanted us to come to her home, but she was almost embarrassed. She lived in a pallet community. It was literally hundreds and hundreds of acres of people that were all packed together that were living in pallet houses. Now, I'm talking about pallets that were taken apart. They were pallets that were leaned up, screwed together with black plastic over the top for roofs, and those were their houses, and they were wall to wall, and there were thousands of them. She had a car battery that ran her lights in that little bitty place. But she was always clean. Everything was always neat about her. You would have never known that she lived in a situation like that. It was very humbling for us. Needless to say, when we went to her home, we gave her a raise. We felt guilty for not doing so. She went way beyond. She did not do it for eye service. Everything she did to the Lord. Now I'm going to tell you a story in relationship to this. Our backyard was no bigger than 12 by 12. It was just a little bitty backyard, but it had grass in it, and it was our responsibility to keep it from growing up. Well, Maria had her wash basin underneath a canopy in the back because there was 6 months of rainy season, and she was protected back there. But she had rain of the whole house. That was where she washed clothes and dried clothes. Right behind there, some of the missionaries had told me that if I got rabbits, I wouldn't have to hire anybody or pay anybody to cut the grass. So I got rabbits, and I built me a little rabbit cage right behind her wash tub that was over a wall. I named those rabbits Roger and Jessica. Now, if you can think, there was a cartoon film that had come out about that time and about Roger and Jessica Rabbit. And so I named them. Every day that Maria would come, the first thing she would do is she would say hi to us, everybody in the house. She would greet us. Then she would go to the back and she would put her purse back there by the wash basin, and she would get things ready for the wash. And then she would not lean over. When she got out there, she would say, "Hola, hola, Jessica y Roger. Good morning. How are you? Hello, Jessica and Roger." Of course, the rabbits never answered. But one day, I was already out in the yard. I was feeding the rabbits, and I was down on my knees looking into the hutch, taking care of Jessica and Roger. And Maria came out, and she didn't see me. And she said, "Hola, Jessica y Roger." And I go, "Hola, Jessica. Hola, Maria. Hola, Maria." And she about fainted. And I stood up, and I laughed and laughed, and she tried to hit me with a towel. We loved Maria. Now, you know what? Maria never had to go the extra mile for us. I don't know whether she knew this scripture, but she did everything she did as to the Lord. I learned a lot from Maria. What about you? What about where you work? What about with your husband or your wife? With your parents or your children? Do you do everything with a sincere heart, a kind heart, not so that they can see you, but because you know that your service is really to the Lord? Think on that. Love you, Steers Chapel.